Batman v Superman is built around the idea that Batman can defeat Superman. The film presents this as preparation beating power, strategy overcoming strength. But Superman never functions as a real threat in the conflict. Batman v Superman is trying to tell a story about fear of power that cannot be controlled. Bruce Wayne sees Superman not as a hero but as a potential catastrophe waiting to happen. From Batman's perspective, the problem isn't what Superman has done, it's what Superman could do. That's why the film spends so much time on preparation. Batman studies Superman, steals kryptonite, builds weapons, and plans for a confrontation he believes is inevitable. Batman fears Superman's power, and Superman represents a power Batman cannot control. For that conflict to work, Superman has to feel like a genuine threat, not morally but physically and situationally. It needs Superman to be powerful enough to justify Batman's fear, but restrained enough for Batman to survive the confrontation. The interesting part isn't that Batman prepares to fight Superman. It's how the story prevents Superman from ever becoming the opponent Batman fears. Before we continue, if you enjoy this kind of story structure analysis, consider subscribing. This channel looks at how films work beneath the surface, not just whether they work. Now back to the analysis. So the film introduces its conflict through Bruce Wayne's fear of Superman's power. From the beginning, Superman is framed less as a person Batman can confront, and more as a force Batman must prepare for. The story first establishes a power imbalance, then builds Batman's strategy around surviving that imbalance. This is why the film spends so much time on preparation. Batman acquires kryptonite, he builds specialized weapons, he studies Superman's capabilities, he constructs a battlefield designed to neutralize Superman's advantages. Structurally, the story is setting up a confrontation where Superman should be the source of pressure and Batman should be reacting to it. The escalation should come from Superman forcing Batman to adapt. Instead, the film manages the conflict by limiting Superman's ability to apply pressure at key moments. Superman rarely initiates confrontation. He hesitates to use force. He repeatedly attempts conversation instead of control. Batman's sides of the conflict escalates through preparation then action, while Superman's sides of the conflict de-escalates through restraint. By the time the fight begins, Batman's plan is fully operational, and Superman has already given up most of the advantages that would have made the confrontation unpredictable. The structure of the story quietly shifts the fight from survival under pressure to execution of preparation, and that shift removes the uncertainty the conflict depends on. The confrontation between Batman and Superman begins long before the fight itself. When Superman arrives to confront Batman, he doesn't arrive as a threat. He arrives to talk. He lands, speaks calmly, and tries to explain Lex's manipulation. The situation immediately requires urgency, but Superman approaches it calmly. At this moment, Superman still has complete control of the physical situation. He can move Batman, he can disarm him, he can end the fight immediately. But the story delays that outcome. Instead of taking control, Superman allows the situation to escalate on Batman's terms. Batman deploys the first weapon. He fires the kryptonite launcher before Superman can close the distance. Superman moves forward expecting resistance, not collapse. When the gas hits him, the change is immediate. His momentum stops, his posture drops, the confidence of physical control disappears in seconds. Batman sees the effect instantly. The weapon works. The plan is no longer theoretical, it's operational. From that moment forward, Batman isn't testing whether his plan might succeed. He knows it can. Once kryptonite enters the conflict, Superman's physical advantage disappears almost immediately. The fight stops being about whether Batman can survive Superman's power and become about whether Superman can survive Batman's plan. Superman tries to regain distance, but the environment now favors Batman. The fight takes place inside a space Batman prepares in advance, enclosed, controlled, and built around Superman's vulnerability. Instead of forcing Batman to improvise, Superman is the one adjusting to unfamiliar limits. Each movement becomes slower, each recovery becomes harder. The advantage that defined the conflict at the beginning is no longer available to him. There are, however, moments where his strength briefly returns. He pushes back, he regains footing. The possibility of the conflict shifting back towards uncertainty flickers for a moment. But those moments never last long enough to change the direction of the fight. The confrontation repeatedly returns to Batman's terms. His space, his weapons, his timing. Superman recovers physically but never structurally. As the confrontation continues, Batman becomes more confident in the strategy he feared might fail. Earlier in the film, Batman's planning is driven by anxiety about Superman's power. During the fight, that anxiety fades as each part of the plan succeeds. If Superman had taken control of the confrontation immediately, the fight would have looked very different. Batman's preparation would have been tested instead of executed. Batman would have needed to adapt in real time, not follow a sequence he had already designed. That version of the confrontation would have forced Batman to face the fear that drives the entire story. Instead, the fight unfolds in a way that keeps Batman's preparations intact. By the time the confrontation ends, the conflict between Batman and Superman has been resolved without Superman ever functioning as the source of pressure Batman feared. Batman's preparation succeeds largely as planned. Superman never forced him to abandon that plan. The fight ends through recognition and empathy rather than escalation. The result is a conflict that looks dangerous, but rarely feels unpredictable. And when unpredictability disappears, the emotional stakes of the confrontation shrink with it. Batman's victory becomes understandable, but less dramatic than it could have been. Batman v Superman is attempting something ambitious. It tries to build a confrontation around fear of power, moral restraint, and preparation against the unknown. That's a compelling foundation for conflict, and in many ways, the film commits to that seriousness in its tone, its pacing, and its willingness to let characters hesitate instead of react impulsively. But the same restraint that defines Superman's character also limits the confrontation the film depends on. By preventing Superman from fully becoming the threat that Batman fears, the story weakens the conflict it spends so long preparing. The fight still works as a moment of recognition between two characters. It just never becomes the unpredictable confrontation the film promises. If there's another film confrontation you think works, or doesn't, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you enjoy this kind of analysis, you can subscribe for more videos like this.